Father, I'll begin by asking you to give us your name and just tell us your full name, Father.
I am Jim Reuter of the Society of Jesus.
Arthur Francis
Bill Kreutz, Edmundo Martinez,
Francis X. Clark,
John Krebs,
Luigi Moggi,
Andrew Bauer,
Miguel Anselmo Bernat.
My name is Honesto. My middle name is Chavez. And last name Pagana.
I'm Roque Angel Ferrios Iglesias.
Father, let's begin by just hearing a few things about yourself, your name, your present assignment, as well as when you first entered the society and when you first got assigned here in Davao.
Yeah. My name is Edmundo Martinez. I studied in the grade school, high school, and college of the Ateneo de Manila. And after college in 1959, I joined the Jesuits. I had my regency in the Ateneo de Manila College, and after my regency, I got a grant from the British Council for postgraduate in philosophy in Oxford University, and then did 3 years of studies in theology in Loyola House of Studies. Then went over to Innsbruck for a master's in theology, and then from there went over to Canada for a doctorate in theology. So my whole field has been in theology all this while, and I was teaching for a while in the Loyola House of Studies in theology until I moved over to the Ateneo de Manila in I think that was 78, 79, and have been involved with the Ateneo de Manila progressively. So I was there all the way up to 1993, and I was doing all sorts of things there. By the time I ended, I was executive vice president. I was also handling the Makati operations. We had that involved as well the computer development there, which we started, and then the Graduate School of Business, then we had the Banking Institute, and in addition I was handling the Alumni Affairs, which originally I had set up in terms of organizing the whole alumni work of the Ateneo de Manila, which was intimately connected with fundraising. So we set up the Eagle Fund, the Eaglet Fund, all sorts of professorial chairs, funding for buildings, grants from USAID, all that sort of thing. So that was from 79 all the way up to 93, as I said, doing all sorts of jobs, basically in administration in the Ateneo de Manila. 93, I was asked to come here, or I was selected or chosen, whatever, to be president of Ateneo de Davao, and I've been here since then, from 93 on. Yeah.
Father, how did you find the change from Manila to Davao? What were your first impressions of Davao, of the people?
From Manila to Davao, there's always a difficulty in terms of shifting, in the sense that it's a kind of an uprooting each time you resettle in a certain area. Fortunately, the experiences of living abroad, both in Europe as well as in Canada, was something that helped me in getting to know yourself and learning how to adjust in these things. Yeah. By the way, there was one other time when I had that was in from Ateneo de Manila. We were going to set up the social kind of a social policy center. This was in the 1980s, and that was part of the work that I was going to do. I was also vice president for planning and development, so this was one area that we wanted to develop. And for that, I had gotten a scholarship from to go to Harvard for an MPA in the Kennedy School in preparation for that. So that that was the experience again, namely living in the States, living in Canada, living in Europe. The most difficult part really is that you leave your friends behind, and the place itself is not particularly important. Well, it is. It's kind of, but even more important are the relationships that you leave behind. So that as far as Davao was concerned, the place itself is something that's kind of more rural than the pace is a little bit slower, but at the same time it also has its own benefits. Namely, you're able to attend 3 meetings outside of the campus in one morning, let us say, whereas in Manila, you're good for 1 meeting a half day, that kind of thing. The place itself, the people have been very friendly. They've been very accommodating and very very welcoming. So that aside from that business of feeling uprooted, I found the place quite pleasant and as a kind of a challenge, really, in the sense that as you get to know more and more of Mindanao, you begin to appreciate the potential role, the potentially critical role that it has for the country. It's not something that you're aware of in Manila, because Manila tends to be a little bit more closed in on itself. But being outside of Manila and you begin to see it in relationship, Manila in relationship to the rest of the country, you begin to see the importance of Mindanao and Davao in particular.
Let's talk a little bit about the history of the school here, of Ateneo de Davao. Perhaps you can give us a little background of how the school started, who were the ones involved in starting this?
The Ateneo de Davao started, as you know, the Jesuits, when the Jesuits returned from its exile or from having been suppressed, and they returned to the Philippines, the mandate of the Jesuits was really specifically for Mindanao and Jolo. And therefore, the society has been very much involved in Mindanao all of this time since the return of the Jesuits in the second half of the 1800s. The Ateneo de Davao started in 1948. It really was formerly a parochial school, a St. Peter's, I believe, parochial school. At the invitation of the bishop, the Jesuits came in and set up the Ateneo de Davao in 1948. And that was Father Teddy Deigler, who recently died. So it was a grade school at that time, and it is in the Marikina campus. Unfortunately, I don't know whether you have there was any picture taken, because as of 2 years ago, the building on which the Ateneo, with which the Ateneo started, was still standing in the Marikina campus, and it was made of wood and a very historic place, certainly in the minds of all those who graduated from the Ateneo de Davao. It's something that they really loved, and you could see that it's something that one could love if you've stayed in it, because it's very cozy and so on and so forth. At any rate, 1948 it was started as a grade school, high school, and then I think this property here was acquired in 1951. It became a university in 1977, and has now a full status, fully accredited by the PAASCO on all levels, and has quite a reputation being a center of excellence and center of development according to CHED criteria. and so has a crucial and prominent role in this part of the country. Yeah.
Having been president here in Ateneo de Davao for some years, and having seen the school and worked in the school for all this time, what would you say would make this educational apostolate here in Davao peculiar to other Ateneos, for example? Would it have some features which would be different from the other Ateneos?
The Ateneo de Davao, what would make the Ateneo de Davao, I suppose, well, each Ateneo in the different parts of the country would have its own peculiar features and its own peculiar strengths and peculiar comparative advantage. One advantage of the Ateneo de Davao is its closeness to the community. And I suppose in that sense, if you just look at Davao, in a sense, it's not that easily accessible as far as the rest of the country is concerned, because you have to fly in, and if you were to come in by way of boat, that's quite some distance. By way of overland transport, it is kind of a little demanding, although the roads are beginning to be improved. So as far as the rest of the country is concerned, unless one were in Mindanao, it is pretty much a self-contained community. And therefore, the Ateneo has had a role here that perhaps would be equivalent of Ateneo de Manila in its earliest years, because it has had such a tremendous influence on the community, being here for 50 years and gaining a reputation that it has gained of being an excellent school, and the reputation of the Jesuits. So all that gives it a particularly an important leadership role in the community, so that there's hardly any place in Davao of any kind of leadership role in which you will not find Ateneo graduates. So that means both in the public sector as well as the private sector, and being dependent on the community. It has responded to the community in the sense that, for example, it's the pricing of its tuition and fees is one that is responsive to the community, so that it does not have that wide a market like Ateneo de Manila, which can really appeal to the whole nation and therefore can really charge whatever it is that it feels it should charge. Here, it's much more responsive to the community, with the result that you begin to have people in the Ateneo de Davao from all levels of society, especially given the fact that we have a rather extensive and functioning grant in aid. So you begin to have the cross-section of the country, of the city and the community being represented in the Ateneo de Davao. Although that's beginning to change more and more as we begin to have to charge higher fees in order to attract better faculty and to train them and so on and so forth. You're beginning to have, but also as the country, the Davao community itself is progressing, unfortunately, you're beginning to have some who will be left behind, who would be of the more, let us say, lower middle class, or well, formerly they could have afforded it. I think more and more, it becomes more difficult for them unless we're really able to overcome it with even more aggressive granting aids.
Father, what are some of the challenges that you're dealing with right now here as in the school, especially not just the grade school and the high school, also in the college? Again, I'll be asking about the present challenges.
Okay, yeah,
that you face,
yeah.
So, Father, what do you think are some of the present challenges that you're dealing with?
The present challenge is really kind of, in a sense, a microcosm of the challenges being met by the country. The demand, or at least the requirement of the country, and therefore also of a university and the school, because you're providing the potential citizens the prospective citizens for that future for the country, is for really top quality, well-educated, globally competitive type of graduate. In other words, you cannot presume, and I think it would be false to presume, that our graduates will stay here and be limited to the potentials and the opportunities that are here. And even the opportunities that are here are changing, because certainly if it is that pattern of development is one from let us say from agriculture to services, is something that is verified as part of the pattern of development. You need more and more people who would be competent to handle issues that really are of the complexity of the modern world. And therefore, you're fighting against one, a tradition, as well as a mentality, as well as a perspective that may not be totally aware yet of these kind of challenges that are coming, that are already here upon us, because we're in a period of transition. So, for example, parents may not appreciate what is involved in the digital age and in the information technology revolution, not having themselves experienced what it is, and in their work not being really challenged by it. You have to kind of think ahead and say that, well, that's not going to be the way it is, and it's already changing, and these students have to be prepared for that. Now, that's true of parents. In some degree, that can be true also of faculty, because unless they themselves have been exposed to the challenges, and very often people get exposed to this if they are able to have graduate degrees from abroad, because that's where you experience it. If you have graduate degrees in Manila, you might experience some of it. If you have graduate degrees here from Davao, you will experience some of it, but not as intensely as you would. So it's a kind of a cultural thing. So what you're doing is you're trying to prepare the students for something that's about 5 steps ahead, and your resources are still a little behind. So that's quite an important challenge, because it's not just a matter of money, it's a matter of attitude, it's a matter of expertise, it's a matter of credentials and capabilities. So we have to do double time in that. Change mentality, try to upgrade people, and try to get them exposed to the challenges that really are already upon us. But unless it really is already affecting you in terms of your own daily life, does not seem so urgent. So most people would be earning by way of their, by way of the traditional means of livelihood, being employed or having a little business. This whole business with regard to that involves the more complex institutional work that involves finances, involves foreign exchange, trade, complex manufacturing.
So Father, just ask you to repeat.
Yeah, okay. Basically, you're trying to prepare your students for the future. And if the future is something that already can be seen in the developed countries and in the developing or the newly industrialized countries in Southeast Asia, you're really looking at preparing students who can think, who can be articulate, who can be creative, who can take knowledge and see it as something important, and has the instincts as well as the capability and the confidence to learn new things, so that it's something that, so it's a peculiar type of learning, where as formerly there seems to be a set of learning that one has, and if you've gotten that, you graduate and then you're prepared for the future. What you're preparing students for is you do have a set of learning, which might be the most valid for the current situation. But by the time they graduate, they must be prepared to be able to relearn a lot of other things and learn new things. Now, that is a very important qualification that is demanded by a culture that, for example, that can drop off its employees and say, fine, I'm sorry, we have to retool, and if you cannot retool, you have to look for another job. When it touches the livelihoods of people, then it becomes very urgent, and therefore you can see the almost the frantic effort in the United States for people to upgrade themselves because it's reflected. It has effect on your livelihood. That's not happening here yet. The culture does not have that kind of sense of urgency in which you would lose your job tomorrow if you really didn't learn something new. It's still a very, in that way, a kind of a rural community. And yet our graduates will be facing the future that will already be global, and that the opportunities will lie not merely here but elsewhere, and even here it's already changing. So you do have to prepare your students for something that's about 5 steps ahead, and the culture as well as the community is still about 3 or 4 steps behind. So that takes quite a bit of doing. That's very challenging. Yeah.
Thank you, Father. Now, looking into the future, what are some of your aspirations and dreams for Ateneo de Davao, for the Davao community, and particularly for the Jesuits here working in Davao?
For the Ateneo de Davao University, I think, again, you have to kind of see Ateneo de Davao in the context of where it is. Clearly, the country is not going to develop and prosper if all expertise and all resources and all competence and expertise are concentrated in Manila. That's not going to happen. And the more they begin to do that, the less efficient or the more difficult it is to develop the whole country. Therefore, the country as a whole has to develop. And if you look at Davao, it's very strategically located. Mindanao is very strategic because it doesn't have any storms, has very fertile land, and an abundance really of natural resources. In fact, I think the government is beginning to recognize it more and more, that Mindanao can be the breadbasket of the Philippines. So that's one. But Davao itself and Mindanao, in relationship to the ASEAN region and the BIMP-EAGA, so that's Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, it's very critical. It's at the heart of that whole BIMP-EAGA region. So my own dream for Mindanao and Ateneo de Davao in particular is that it be not merely, I think in the next few years, hopefully within the next 5 years, that we would really try to be on a level that is truly competitive with Manila in terms of the quality of the education we have. I think in some areas we already are. For example, in the law, if you just take it by way of the bar exams, we placed 3rd last year, supplanting Ateneo de Manila. So that kind of thing. So, but those things are, those are just government exams, and so we do well in those things. What's important is the general level of the education as such, and that is why we would like within the next few years to really be on a level with Ateneo de Manila and the best schools in Manila. And that is why we're investing quite a lot in this information technology revolution, because we think that that is an instrument, a kind of a tool that can propel us and give us resources, let's say research resources, availability of information that otherwise we could not hope to do if we had to buy books all the time. But with the information technology and the internet and the resources that become available because of what you call the digital information revolution, quite a lot becomes possible. Long term, we really would like to be a school that can compete with the best schools in the ASEAN region. Now, that's quite a tall order, because if you think of Chulalongkorn University, that's founded by the king of Thailand, It has resources by way of I don't know how many hectares of prime property in downtown Bangkok that's generating income for it and supported by the government, that kind of thing. And that's the kind of target we have, that we would like to be able to be on a class that can really compete with the region. So in that sense, if we're no longer competing with Manila, we would think that that is something that's really achievable, and within a reasonably short time, I think that can be done. But that other one of the ASEAN region, that requires quite a bit of doing. But we have enough time to plan. We have enough time to be able to marshal resources for it. Give you an example, because some people will say, oh, that's a pipe dream. How could you ever afford that without government support? Well, you can see the location of this campus. Let's just talk finances. This campus is about 3 hectares. We already have, for the university, a 65-hectare property at the foot of the Mount Apo, at least in the foothills of Mount Apo, overlooking Davao Gulf, which is really a beautiful campus. That would be the size of Ateneo de Manila. Now, that kind of a campus we already have. We have between now and the time that that campus becomes part psychologically of the city. In other words, we begin to move there when that Katigan property is seen to be part already of the city, the way Loyola Heights is now seen to be part of Manila. Once we arrive at that point, it becomes really viable to put up your undergraduate program there and certain graduate programs and have a university town. In other words, with 65 hectares, you can plan it so that it is a university where students live in, when you can begin to attract people not only from Manila but from the ASEAN region and give them a first-class education in a campus atmosphere beside a cosmopolitan city like Davao. Okay, you have that. Then we have all of this property here that can really begin to be co-developed or partially sold, and since it's in the heart of downtown, at one point I was told it was hitting already 70,000 pesos per square meter here. You could begin to generate income by way of co-development. So you could plan for a campus that really in terms of facilities can be world-class, and you would have the resources for it. So it's not a pipe's dream. I think financially. Now, the really more important one is to have the student body as well as the faculty that can deliver world-class education. And that's the importance, aside from the fact that it has its own value to educate the grade school and the high school in a top-notch manner. A further consequence of that is to prepare those high school students to become students of the Ateneo de Davao, such that our quality of student body really goes up. So that's the importance of the emphasis we're putting in the grade school and the high school. Now over here, I think when you begin to look around, we really are trying to develop our faculty and our programs so that we begin to gain the reputation, in fact, as well in reality as well as in reputation, to be a top-notch school. So that would be my dream. Now, what's important with regard to the Society of Jesus is that it begins to appreciate the critical role that such a university can play. Just as there is I hate to use the term, but a paradigm shift in terms of what education is, that you're now training people who really are knowledge, if you wish, knowledge wise, in the sense that they can generate knowledge and kind of tap knowledge elsewhere, and be really critical thinkers and original thinkers so that they can really survive. So also the apostolate of the society, I think, is beginning to change, and people have to appreciate this. The importance of this whole area of knowledge and the whole area of influencing the thinking of people is something that may be different from saying noonday mass and running a retreat. That is not important, but there is this whole area that is going to be shaping the world and shaping our region. and Jesuits have to be prepared for it. Now, unfortunately, if you begin to run a university so that it really, yeah, I mean, from my part, I can only respond to the needs and respond to prepare for the future as I see it and according to the resources available, and you just do it. Now, the rest is conjecture. In other words, the way I would see how things could develop. And with regard to the university, if it is responding to real problems and real needs of the community and the region, and if it's doing that in a very acceptable, if not excellent way, the university will have a future. I mean, it will go off on its own because it's not one man. You're creating faculty, you're creating institutions, you're creating a culture that independent of an individual, and unfortunately independent even of Jesuits, can begin to function on its own. My wish for the Society of Jesus is that it appreciates the importance of a university like this and prepare people for it. That it doesn't do it in a kind of a casual way and say, oh, by the way, somebody needs, so we need a president in Ateneo de Davao, we better look for somebody, and who's available. It's no longer of that type. You're now competing in a very complex situation. The institution itself is becoming complex. People have to be prepared for it, and a sense of urgency and a sense of the vision, I think, has to be communicated, because it's not something that can be built overnight. I'd be happy myself, I've been here 6 years. We give another 3 years, that would be something that hopefully we could already finish this building, put our engineering programs on a level that really is top-notch, because we would have the facilities for it, be immersed already in the information technology in terms of our own curriculum and our own syllabus and the use of it by students, that kind. The things that have to happen beyond that, that will be called for, as a lot more. People have to plan for it, and those things have to be done carefully and over time. And I just hope that the society realizes this. For the Ateneo de Davao, I think, unfortunately, I'll give you an example. Right now, I do not have in the Ateneo de Davao a senior administrator, line administrator who is a Jesuit. That's hard. So my principal, the headmaster, the dean of the undergraduate, the dean of the graduate, they're all lay people. So I'm training them to think Jesuit, to be competent, and we're training our whole faculty through Ignatian spirituality workshops to really have the ideals of a Jesuit Ignatian spirituality, that kind of thing. But no Jesuit. We have Jesuits in the formative processes, so campus ministry, chaplaincy, teaching. But it's very critical to have a Jesuit in the executive role, because he's the one that gives a direction very strongly to where the university is going and what is considered important. So that's something that I would hope begins to be appreciated more and more.
Thank you, Father. Father, my final question. What I've been hearing you say is that the key to the progress of this country is education, the level of education, especially in a crucial area like Davao. But why does this education have to be Jesuit?
Education in the Philippines, as you can see, is beginning to be appreciated. Education as such is beginning to be appreciated in the Philippines. Give you an example. Ateneo de Manila has been there for 140 years, and you have the Loyola Heights campus to show for it, plus the Rockwell. The University of Asia and the Pacific has not yet been there for 10 years, I think, and already it has taken for itself a certain niche in terms of the education of, if you wish, the elite in Manila. You begin to have Woodrow, Southridge. You begin to have schools like STI or AMA, computer schools, and you say, well, those are just computer. Yeah, but take a look at the number of students. Take a look at the number of people who are going to them. So they're responding to needs, and there is a lot of needs that are coming in, and there is a profusion of schools trying to meet those needs. So those needs, those schools would not be prospering if people didn't realize that there is a need for education. So by and large, whether Jesuits are there or not, education will go on, and other people will be as imaginative to respond to those needs of education according to the circumstances, and they are responding. So my point earlier that I hope the society will begin to appreciate the critical role of education is more on the part of the society recognizing the importance of education in a developing situation like this, and having had already by providence the kind of several steps ahead of all these other schools to exploit its position of advantage that has been there all along rather than dissipate it. So as far as education is concerned, therefore, it does not have to be Jesuit if it's just going to meet the needs of the people. However, we do know, both from experience as well as from our own understanding of society and our ideals as Jesuit, that technical expertise and professional expertise alone does not make a good education. There are the values that come from the Gospels that are important. Values of concern for the neighbor, values of compassion for the poor, values of justice and equity, all those are very important, for which we are, as Jesuits, are kind of committed to develop, and I must admit, and must accept, and people will accept, are pretty competent in communicating those values if we do our job well. And therefore, we do have a role in this whole development that is coming upon the Philippines, that cannot be given just by any other school, but must be given by the society. That's what I mean in terms of the paradigm shift. You're not just thinking in terms of digging a ditch and saying, now you have water for your barong-barong and I feel satisfied, I've done my work of justice. You're talking of generations of people for whom your own contribution towards justice may be minimal, but is quite important because you've formed them in their critical stage. And therefore, you're talking of generations of people that will be thinking along the lines of having justice, of being compassionate, of concern for the poor. And this is not something that I can say, that was my work. No, it's a kind of a collegial work of the institution. And that paradigm shift involves as well as an emotional shift, whereby Jesuits have to begin to have faith in their work, and not a kind of palpable faith that the fishes have been multiplied and therefore will perform the miracle, but a kind of faith that that can see ahead of in the future that, look, we graduated 1,000 students this year. Sure, we might have failures of about 5%, 10%, but the generality of those 900 students that are left have the basic foundation. What will they do in the future? We don't know. But we do know that they have been formed according to our ideals, and they will have to struggle with that in the future and try to make it bear fruit. Now, have enough faith in your own work that they will bear fruit. I mean, don't pick out and say, look, that guy is not following these ideals of Jesuit education, close that school. That's a rather short-sighted way of looking at things, and I would say the world is no longer that simple. It's much more complicated, and the institutions play much more important roles, I think, than individuals, although individuals give direction to the institutions. So in that sense, I think there is a real role for Jesuit education in the Philippines, and it would be a shame if we didn't really continue it and really give the contribution that is ours to give, provided that we are able to appreciate what we have.
Thank you very much. That was my last question. But if
Okay,
you want to add
fine.
any pahabol or...
Well, I don't know. By way of pahabol, it's... I started in the beginning by way of challenging you asked for what, I was asked what the challenge is here in Davao by way of present, and I was talking in terms of the mentality of that would be prevalent in the current community, because it has not yet experienced the changes that are taking place already in other parts of the world and even in Manila. And that will then necessitate a change of attitude and a change of mentality. I would say that's the same thing in a parallel way that's happening with the Society of Jesus. It has to appreciate that the mentality with which we operated is something that can be healthily questioned, and that you begin to look forward on what actually is happening and really do it in a way that is intelligent and that is forward-looking. And unless we do that, we would not be prepared to meet those challenges, which would be unfortunate because we are equipped to be able to do it and to change, to address the changes that will be coming up now. But then, as you know, the whole history is under the providence of God. What the society will play in it will be dependent on. But to the extent that we are responsible for our own decisions and responsibilities, that's the kind of challenge that we have to face. Now, in the end, if it still doesn't work, well, that's part of the providence of God, and you just do what you can at the time that you have it. You have no control over 10, 20 years from now.
Thank you very much.
Okay? Thank you. Sige.